It's been a while since I've made a video where I just talk about art things. I wanted to make a video about making art using VR, which is about 4 years late, really, because I don't think people are that excited about VR anymore, but it's something that I still use to make art. I use it for the blockout phase when I'm making a painting, and it's a tool which I find really helpful because I use a lot of blockouts in Blender or Max or Maya, and fighting with polygons is not anyone's favourite thing to do when you're just trying to make a blockout really fast to make a painting. So working with voxels, working with the little controllers is super helpful for that. Let's dig straight into it, shall we? My process always starts with a little bit of reference gathering in Pinterest, and I'm just trying to get together some rough ideas of where I'm going to take it before I jump straight into VR and experiment with adding firstly a character scale, which is definitely not done in any scientific way, and also drawing out a ground plane and some beginning things like trees, just to give me a starting place. There's nothing worse than an empty canvas. Also making sure that I try to make the ground not just be a flat space, but adding things like steps and divots into the ground. These give texture to where the lighting is going to hit, but also mean that it gives interest to the terrain. Also just filling in the background and making sure that there's something going on to make an excuse for how the lighting is going to fall through the trees. I don't wait for long before I start adding architecture in, and again, I'm not being particularly scientific about this or correct. I just want to get things in as a start point, and because these are ruins, the nice thing about ruins is they don't really have to make sense, so I can just kind of go for it and do some experimental stuff. Once I've got a first pass of the blockout done, I just import it straight into Unreal. This one imported super small, so tiny, so I increased the scale by 10, and then I could rotate it around and start experimenting with applying a nice flat whitish material to give me a consistent base to work with, and then to start experimenting with adding shadow planes to give a focal point where the lighting is, I kind of imagine coming through the trees into this glade and just lighting a small portion of the environment. At this point, I start to experiment with camera angles. I rotate the terrain a little bit just to get a feel for how it could look at different angles, and then it's straight onto sketching over. This is a really flexible part of the design process, and it's a bit I really enjoy. I'm not worried too much about creating something perfect here. I'm just experimenting with, do trees need to move? Does there need to be more architecture here? Could these be pillars? Should there be windows? I'm just thinking about what cool stuff I can add when I go back into VR for a second pass. Most of my work is not linear. I tend to go back and forth a lot between 2D and 3D and sketching. I might add a little bit of a model from Blender if I need something a bit more solid. This sketch is done with the plan of returning back to Adobe Medium to do another sculpt pass, and if needed, I could go back and forth multiple times until I get something I'm happy with. I do need there to be a block out there. I'm not just making it up completely out of nowhere, and so I want to make sure the block out does actually give me something to work with. So back into VR, I've brought in my image plane and very quickly get into just making some archways and experimenting with adding more interest. I also go in and remove a bunch of the original trees I'd done. The reason I put the trees there in the first place, as I said, was to get rid of the kind of empty canvas that I was working with. So I went in then, once I'd removed the trees, and thought a bit more solidly about what kind of architecture can be there, if I need to put in new, more solid trees. And at that stage, I'm pretty happy with where it's going. So I can go in and start thinking about the greenhouse portion of it. This is the one bit where I think in hindsight I should have done it in Blender, because I really struggled with making this work in the painting, and I'm still not super happy with how the greenhouse turned out. I also go in and do a couple of tweaks in Blender before I'm happy with the final shot, and I can bring it into Photoshop for an overpaint. Again, going back in with the sketching, I want to make sure that I'm still pretty solid on my idea, so just going in, working over my VR sketch to just finalise any details. I also go back into Unreal Engine and add a water plane to the scene. It means that I don't have to guess so much about how the water's going to look in perspective. I can break it if I need to, but it just gives me something to work with, so I know where the water is going to be for this little stream running through the middle. To create water that feels believable, it makes a lot of sense to kind of paint everything that is under the water first, almost as if the water isn't there, and then adding the water effects over the top afterwards. So adding the water lilies over the top to give that solidity to the plane of water. I make sure I start playing with the values as well. I don't see the block out as my final value scheme. I want to go in and tweak it some more. I turn my scene black and white a lot to check my values. And the main thing I'm doing here is just going in with some darker values to push the background behind the greenhouse backwards to make it stand out even further in that little pool of light that it sat in. This was just a little thing I also ended up doing, like adding some weird sort of character shadow scribbly things just to give myself an idea for what the scene would look like in the context of some characters. I go straight in with colours in an overlay layer mode. The overlay layer mode is nice because it doesn't damage anything underneath. It keeps all of the values that I've been working with. And then one of my favourite bits is to take the sketch, make it super low opacity, and start to see the painting for what it is without the distraction of the sketch. Because the sketch does kind of ruin the value structure a little bit. It's quite shouty and overwhelms the painting. I can start working into the base I've created. And a lot of when I'm painting at this stage is just trial and error. Everything up to this point, I've been kind of trying to consider the value structure and the colours a little bit. And then from here on out, it's really just a case of painting what feels good. So the way that I tend to paint is a little bit chaotic. You can see I just work into everything for a few seconds and then move over to something else. This video is running at about 10 times speed, so things seem to be happening pretty quick, but actually it's a little bit slower than it would appear. You can see I've gone in and I've started adding mostly ambient occlusion to areas in the foreground, especially in the water. I really want to give that sense of depth, and that was a big challenge I had set myself, was to make water feel good in this. I'm also making sure I go into the greenhouse area. I was really struggling with this and I didn't really know how to make it feel good, and I'm still not 100% happy with it, but I wanted to add some window details to make it feel a little bit more whimsical. I have quite a few fights with this greenhouse throughout the course of this painting, and this is one of them where I'm not sure what colour to do it, what scale. It just didn't feel quite right, and I considered just removing the greenhouse and having it as like a ruined glade. But I had really told myself I would do a greenhouse in this painting, and to bail on that felt like a failure. I really enjoyed painting this tree in the foreground and adding all the roots. It was something that felt really satisfying to go in and add that root system. I struggle a lot with painting, to be honest with you, and so to come into this and really have a crack at it after a long time of not painting properly was a bit intimidating, but I really enjoyed adding the water lilies, adding some extra trees to add depth to the scene, and just giving this feeling of overgrowth and coziness. You can see also I add a tree back in front of the greenhouse and actually take the greenhouse back to how I had it before. The struggle was finally over. I'd kind of had enough of it at this point. Here I'm in probably the last couple of hours of the painting, and most of the value scheme is in place. And so I start just thinking about colour tweaks, more overlay layers to separate the architecture from the trees and the foliage, and trying to make that water really feel like it glows. I'm not changing anything in particular, I'm just going in with overlay layers and adding those extra colours in. Then it was time to add the final touches like foliage and some colourful flowers and things like that. These are the things that are kind of the last 5% of the painting, but they really add a lot, especially little things like grass blades, where you have changes between areas of light and dark. Adding little grass blades so the patches of the grass themselves don't have lots of detail, but the silhouettes imply that detail. Painting up these flowers and just adding a sense of kind of more detail in the foreground than I have in the background. I probably could have spent more hours on this, many hours rendering it and making it perfect, but I'm not one for perfectionism. I just want to get kind of a vibe and then move on to my next painting, somewhere between illustration and concept art, I suppose. I go in for another fight with this tree and then give up because I couldn't make that tree feel good at all. I don't know why. The last final touches are some god rays, some little light sparkles, my favourite thing to add, and of course a little signature. And then I can call the painting done. I really want to do more stuff like this, more VR blockouts and paintings. It's actually something I think about a lot when I'm going about my life, and then I never get round to actually picking up the VR headset and doing it. I've also realised I go throughout my life looking at the world as if I'm a 3D artist and also like a painter, I guess. I look at trees and go, how would I make this tree look so good in 3D? Which the answer is I probably wouldn't, because trees are really hard. But I've taken a bit of a break from making game art, and I've realised that it does permeate my brain in a way that I guess 10 years of working in games would do that to you. So I really want to do more stuff like this. I hope you found it interesting, and I look forward to making the next painting and sharing it on this channel. Thank you for watching. See you next time.